Welcome to the Force Coding channel. This is Prakhar, and today we will going to learn about name credentials. So let's quickly start. So basically, name credentials are used to specify the URL for callouts and with the required authentication. So before name credential, we generally use remote site settings, and there we usually, declare our external link and then use that link for our callouts. But with name credentials, we can specify the URL that we will going to use for our callouts. And apart from that, we can also declare the authentication that we required from that external data source. Or you can say whatever the external data service that you are using for your callouts, you can generally, authenticate that in your name credentials, right? So it work in a way that when you define your external source in your name credentials, then you no longer required to do the authentication part in your Apex code. You can directly use the callout, or you can say you can directly use that name credential name in your callout, and the name credential will automatically will give you the header for your callouts. So in the demo, we will going to explore that how it will work, right? The next thing is that it can be used in below areas, that is Apex callout that we all know, and then external data sources and the external services that we use to basically, right, connect our Salesforce with an external system, right? So name credentials basically use some protocols like we have OAuth, password authentication, JWT token exchange, and AWS signature version 4. We have two types that we can declare on name credential. The first one is per user, and the second one is name principal authentication. And the basic difference between these two is like, suppose that you need, or you can say that you have an external system, and it is something, you can say that's a service which will going to provide you data irrespective of the logged in user on your Salesforce platform, right? And on the other hand, if you see on the per user basic, then it is something that depend upon the user credentials, that what level of access it has on that external system, right? So let's say that you have a external system and there are two users, and those two users have different permissions on that external system. So you want that once they are connected in Salesforce, the data that will going to be required from the external system will be based on the logged in users in your Salesforce, right? So these are the two types which are supported by name credentials, and we will definitely going to explore them in our demo, right? And then we have a way that we can enable these name credentials from profile or permission set to manage the permission from name credentials. So let's say that what users should have that access to create name credentials or to even see the name credentials, you can set them on a profile or a permission set basis, right? Now the next is that how we can use these name credentials, right? So as a matter of the steps that we need to follow is like we can simply go to the setup, and in the setup menu you can search for name credentials. On a particular name credentials, you have to specify the information for your name credentials, like the label, name, URL, identity type that we have discussed, that whether it is per user or it is name principals, and then the authentication provider, that's basically the what kind of authentication the external service support, whether it is a JWT or OAuth or password authentication, right? And let's say that you have created that name credentials, then how to use that, or you can say that how we can refer that name credentials in your Apex callout, Then it's the below code that we have here, like the HTTP request. We can just create an instance of that, and then we can set the endpoint. And if you can see, we just need to declare this call out colon and the my credential, my name credential name that you specify in your label and name here in the external system information. So you can simply refer that name, and Salesforce automatically generate the header for this call out with the required authentication that you require for that external system. Right. So that is much that is all about the theory part of name credential. Yeah, these are the two permissions, you can say, that you need to have if you want to create name credential. The first one is the customize application permission, and the second one is view setup and configuration permission. So you have the option to set it on a particular profile or a permission set, right? And then you should maintain this thing that the user capability that you get with the customized application permission is something that you need to first understand, that what sort of permissions you are getting from this particular permission, the customized application. Because if you have some requirements where you want to create want to give some users the ability to create name credential, but on the other hand you don't want to give some other permissions which is included in the customized application permission, then you need to sort out that. So this is the link. Also, I'll just post that link in the description so that you can refer this link to know that what capabilities users have once they have the customized application permission, right? So now it's time to move on our demo, where we will explore that how we declare a name credential and how we can use that name credential. For our demo, basically we use the OAuth as our authentication provider, and for external system we will going to use another Salesforce org, right? So we'll going to use that org as our external service, and we'll authenticate that in our name credential, right? Okay, so let's quickly move on to the demo. So we are in the setup menu of Salesforce org, and here you can go and search name credentials. So here we have the option to create a new name credential. You can also refer this definition, which is like a name credential specifies a call out endpoint and its required authentication parameters, right? So we go and click on this new name credential. Here you can see that you can give the label, the name of the name credential, and the URL for your external service, right? Then we have the column of authentication. Here you can declare if you have any certificate to authenticate with your external service. Here you can specify the identity type, that whether it is per user or name credential, name principal. Then we have the authentication protocol, right? So if I select this name principal, then you will have these authentication protocols like the OAuth, password authentication, AWS signature version 4, JWT, and JWT token exchange, right? And then you have these options, that call out options. Here you have this first checkbox, which is generate authorization header, right? And you can also read here that the name credential generates an authorization header and applies it to each callout that references the name credential. So basically, when you create a name credential and use it in a callout, the Salesforce will going to generate the authorization header and put that in your callout automatically. So this checkbox is just used to allow this feature to work. The next option here is the allow merge fields in HTTP header. So let's say that you have an external API where you have headers which are not the ones or the usual ones which can be declared in the header part, or it is something which can be declared or which should be declared in the body. So if there any kind of a customization in setting up those headers, then you can simply click these checkboxes and refer those credentials directly in your Apex code, right? So if I go and simply see these merge fields in HTTP header, let's simply go and search these. So on the developer Salesforce docs, you can find these fields, that how you can refer these merge fields in your Apex callout, right? So here you can see that these are the merge fields that you can use. So you have the username. Let's say that you have selected the password authentication in your authorization provider. So you can use the username and password in your code. And if you are going with the OAuth one, then you can directly refer that using this merge field, right? So these are some merge fields. Like you can use that in your Apex code if you are not using the default option for generating the authorization headers automatically, right? So for the demo, I am keeping this simple, right? And we will going to use, first of all, a free API just to see that how you will going to refer a call out, sorry, how you can going to refer the name credential in callout. Okay, so for this I am not using any external service which require authorization. So this is the API which is providing the data without any authorization. So I simply put this URL, name it as free API for now, right? So this is the name that we have specified for this name credential, right? And for the identity type, I'm leaving it with no authentication and anonymous, right? And leaving this as generate authorization header, right? And simply save this. All right. So now we have created our first name credential, and we will going to check that how you will going to refer this name credential in your Apex callout. So we're going to move this developer console and go to the execute window. Here we have the basic HTTP request and response Apex code. And as you can see that the endpoint is empty. So we will going to use the name credential that we have used and check that whether it is working or not, or whether it is providing the URL, right? Because the headers are not going to have the authentication part, but still it will going to have those headers. So we'll going to check this by simply referring the name of the name credential, and here you will going to add the path, right? So I've just added the path. Now we are expecting that it will going to fetch the URL automatically here, and also the headers, right? So we're going to execute this. So as you can see, we have this data which this free API is providing. So we can see that the code that we have written here for the endpoint is working, and the name credential that we have created is actually providing and adding those headers to this callout, right? So now in this, we just have seen that how we can refer a name credential, right? But we have created this name credential without using any authentication protocol, right? So what we will going to use next is we going to use one Salesforce org as our external system, right? And using OAuth settings, we will going to authenticate that in our name credential, right? So for that, what I have done is that I have a second org, the parent org, I should say, and I have just created one connected app so that my child org can connect to it using the name credential, right? So I have already created this connected app for the demo, right? So I have given the scope that this connected app is going to allow, like it has the full access and the refresh token and offline access, the API one. So I just, for the demo purpose, I have given all these, right? And yeah, and we have the consumer key and secret. And on our child org, where we need to create a name credential for our parent org, we have to create a auth provider. So I have already created one auth provider, the parent connector. And as you can see that for this connected app, I have given the consumer key and secret, right? And I guess this callback URL, I have already added this here in the connected app. So it's just a general flow that if you want to connect to an external service, and if it is a Salesforce, then you have to have a connected app so that an external service can connect to it. And on the other hand, if I see from this child log perspective, I should have a auth provider to authenticate with the external services which have the authorization attached to it, right? So I have this auth provider created, and on the parent auth, I have this connected app, right? And the reason why I need this auth provider is quite straightforward in the name credential. So if I go to the name credential, and this time we create one new name credential where we want to connect to this parent org, right? So I just name it as parent org. And for the URL, we just copy this URL, paste it here. Yeah, one thing you noticed, like it is containing the lightning URL format, I should say. So you have to convert it to the previous one that Salesforce provide, the classic one, right? And this is something that should be done, because if you don't make this change, it will not going to work and will provide you some sort of an error while you are making this call out, right? And then for the authentication part, what we have to do is like we have to select this name principal. So for the first we will going for this name principal, and then we'll see that what per user will going to provide, right? This is the name principal, and here I'm selecting the OAuth 2.0. Now, as you can see here, it is asking for the authentication provider, right? So what you have to do is select the parent connector auth provider that you have declared, right? And you don't have to like declare the scope again because you have already done in the auth provider. So you don't have to do that, right? And here, once you save it, the authentication flow will go into execute, right? So I guess that everything is set up. Now, once I save this, it will going to authenticate this org or the URL that we have specified here using the authentication provider that we have provided, right? So let's save this. Yeah. So now it is asking the parent org credential. So I have to provide this. So now it will going to authenticate me on this name credential. So here you can see that status is authenticated as prefer.parent, which is my parent or credentials. So now I'm all set for using this name credential in my Apex callout. So we have this name for our name credential. Let's quickly go to the developer console to use this callout. But before that, we what API we need to call. So for that, as a demo, I have just created one API at the parent org end, which is simply returning the accounts. So as you can see here, I've just created one account manager class, declared it as a REST resource, and have a HTTP GET method, which is returning the accounts, right? It's just for the demo purpose, I have created this. So now we know that we can refer the parent org here, and for the Apex services, we have to use this, and then the name of the REST resource that we have, that is account manager. All right, so now we are calling the parent org API using our name credential that we have used, right? So let's quickly execute this. It should work. So as you can see, we have the data from our parent org, right? And we are using the name credential with the authentication provider as our OAuth 2.0, right? So as you can see that it is pretty straightforward in name credentials that you can specify the URL and the authentication part. So you don't have to maintain those credentials in your system using some kind of an encryption and all. You simply use this name credentials, and the encryption and the security part is something which is handled by the Salesforce automatically for you, right? So the last one that I want to explain in this demo is the other type of type that we have in our name credential, that's user type. So let's create a new name credential for this user type. Here we can name it as parent user org, and for the URL we're going to use the same of our parent org. Remember to change this name. For the identity type, we need to select the per user OAuth 2.0. The authentication provider will be the same. All right. And this time we need to uncheck this because we don't want to authenticate this on save as is it per user. So we have in our hand that we can assign it to some user profiles and they can individually authenticate this accordingly, right? So let's say that this is our parent org, right? And on this parent org, let's say we have two users. This is the one that we have used for our named principal, right? And it is the administrator one. Sorry, this one, yeah. And the another user on this org is the manager one, right? Which is a standard user, right? So now what I want is that let's say that on a child org we have a profile, right? A different profile from the uh, administrator one, and we want to assign this per user name credential to them. So it is their responsibility to log in using their credential that they have in this org, right? And they can access that data accordingly, and whatever the permission and access level assigned to the profile in the parent org, right? So now for the sake of simplicity, what I'll do first that instead of creating multiple profiles and multiple things, let's test this in this child org using the system administrator only. So what I'll do is I'll quickly first of all save this, right? So as you can see, the authentication status is pending, right? So it is not yet like authenticated, and even if we try to use it, let's say we are in our developer console, quickly go this, replace this with our name credential, which is we use for per user, right? Rest is the same, and try to execute. So as you can see, we get an error. You don't have permission to view this data because we have not set up the credential for this name credential, right? And as we know that, yes, definitely we have not yet set up these credential because we want it to be on a per user basis. So first of all, the thing that you need to do in case of per user, that you need to assign it to a profile, right? So let's say that we have different users with different profiles here, right? As you can see, we have different profiles. We can anytime assign that per user name credential to any profile. Now, how we can do that? That quickly go to any of the profile. Let's go to the system administrator, right? And here, if I go and search for this name credential, then you can see here that we have enable name credential access, right? So here we have the option to edit this. And as you can see, here we have that name credential that we have created on the type of per user, right? And only per user type are visible here, not the name principal. This is also need to be like taken care when you are deciding this part. So I just click on this and enable this name credential for the system administrator profile and save it. And once you save this, it will be visible under the user's personal setting. Now the thing you need to understand is that as we are working on system administrator, we can easily go to the name credential option and we can view all the name credentials that we have. But definitely for other profiles which are not administrator, they don't have the option, right? They don't have the option to view name credentials because this is something which is a business need, and it's very critical to show this details to other users in your organization, right? So that's the reason that you have this option in your profile where you can assign the per user type of name credential so that your users can authenticate themselves using their credential because they don't have the option to access the name credential. The only way to give this name credential access is by providing the customized application permission to that particular profile, right? And you don't want everyone to access this these kind of critical information, right? So that's the reason we have this per user type so that individually a particular user can authenticate themselves, right? So as I said that once you set this type of name credential, you can definitely go to the settings, and in the settings you will have the option for the authentication settings for external systems. So click on this, and here you have to click on this new. And as you can see, we have the name credential, we have the parent user org that we have created, right? And here you have the option to select the user. The reason why you are getting this user option selection is just because I am on the system administrator org, right? Uh, but if you are on a profile which don't have this level of access, then you will not get this user selection option, and it will automatically be attached to the logged in user. But here I have the option because I'm a system administrator right now. So I can select that, okay, this is the user, which is the logged in one, right? And I can authenticate this right now, right? So just to make a difference, like how it will going to work for other users, while authenticating, this time instead of using the system administrator one, we will going to use the standard user. So now this name credential will get authenticated with this manager profile instead of the system administrator, right? So the level of access will going to be differ, right? So just to give you a little setup that I have done in this parent org is that I have created one account using the manager's profile, right? So I have just one account which is created by the manager, and the sharing setting for account is private, right? That's mean that only the one who have created those records will have the access to the records, right? And I have not created any sharing rules and something like that. So for the manager profile, or you can say that for the manager user, uh, they will going to only see the accounts which they have created, right? And not all the accounts or other accounts. So as I told that only a single account is created by this manager users. So now if I try to access, right, the parent user org here, then we should get only a single record that we have created instead of all the records that we were getting previously while we are using the name principle, right? So let's just execute this. So as you can see now that we are only getting a single record, which is the manager account, and we are not getting the one that we are getting with the named principal one, right? Even we can check it again if I just go and use the name credential that we have created for name principal, then we should get all the records. Here you can see, right? We are getting all the accounts. And in case of this per user, we are getting only the one for which we done the authentication in our settings, right? So this is the basic difference which is there between this type, right? So you can use these type according to your usage, that if you want to give access to, to a particular user on external system, then you can go with a per user type. Or if you have only a single level of access on the external system, which is providing the data irrespective of the logged in user, like, authentication part, then you can simply go with the name principal, right? Yeah, I guess that's all that we have, at least for the name credential part. You can definitely explore the documentation attached for credentials, right? And if you have any query, or if you're stuck in any of the demo part while doing it at your end, then you can surely comment so that I can help you on that part. So okay, thank you so much guys for watching this tutorial. And if you really like this session, then kindly subscribe to the channel. Thank you.